Hey guys, what's up? It's Alex here. Welcome back to another video. And in today's video, we're going to be speaking somewhat about pre-season testing because even though you can't draw too much from it, you can still learn a little bit from pre-season testing and have a bit of an idea going into Australia what is going to happen. But of course, we must start this video off by saying it's pre-season testing. In reality, the numbers don't really mean too much because something drastically different could happen by the time we get to Australia. Of course, the teams have quite a few weeks to get race ready and they could be changing a lot. I mean, just between the two pre-season testing, we saw people like Mercedes come with pretty drastic updates, which was interesting to see. So by the time they have even more time, 2 or 3 weeks, they'll get to Australia and they might have a completely different drastic car. So it's very interesting, but nonetheless, we're going to try and take something from pre-season testing. So we'll look at the times, we'll look at the tyres, and we'll also look at the total laps and the power units, what they're playing like as well, and who's got the most power unit laps underneath them. That's going to be an interesting one to speak about later. Nonetheless, you guys already know this already. Sebastian Vettel was the fastest in pre-season testing in complete total. He did 534 laps, and he was quickest on day number 4 of the second test on the fastest compounded tyres, or the softest compounded tyres. He did a 1:16.221. Lewis Hamilton was, 3 thousandths of a second back on a 1:16.224, and then Charles Leclerc was 7 thousandths of a second back from Hamilton on a 1:16.231. So very, very close between the top 3 overall in pre-season testing, just a 100th of a second separating those. Valtteri Bottas wasn't that far back, he was I think 3/10 of a second back, and then Hulkenberg, pretty decent job for Renault as well. But I think most notable out of all of these numbers is that Lewis Hamilton managed to complete 638 laps in his Mercedes over the practice days. There's 8 practice days and he did that many laps. Quite insane stuff from Lewis Hamilton there. And for someone that sort of makes me think of someone that doesn't really care about pre-season testing. Sometimes I feel like he jets off after winning a championship or whatever and doesn't really bother about testing. He doesn't care at the end of each season. He's really dedicated himself to just getting so many laps here in pre-season testing at the start of 2019, which is very, very interesting to me. But nonetheless, it is pretty apparent, even though, as we say, times don't mean much, but times mean a little bit. And the fact that we see that Ferrari and Mercedes are at the top on the softest compounded tyres, pretty much doing the most laps out of everyone, I think it's pretty safe to say, I mean, it's not a drastic leap, I think it's pretty safe to say in Australia the top 2 teams will be Ferrari and Mercedes. I would like to be proven wrong, I'd like to see someone different in there. I mean, Nico Hulkenberg wasn't too far back in his Renault, but as we said, pre-season testing doesn't mean anything, but Nico Hulkenberg not doing too bad, 6/10 of a second back from Sebastian Vettel. It'd be quite interesting to see whether Renault are ahead of Red Bull. I don't think it's going to happen, but it would be quite interesting to hear. We'll see. So we go down the list as well. Also impressive lap times for both the Toro Rosso guys. They were pretty quick throughout. And McLaren also being a bit surprising to be up the order, but as we said, it doesn't really mean anything because Red Bull are down there on a 1:17.091 and they did 899 laps, which is quite impressive. Once again, I mean, pretty much every team except from Racing Point and Williams, in fact, yes, all teams apart from those two did over 800 laps, which is really, really impressive. And I'm not exactly sure what happened to Racing Point where they did so little laps in comparison to the rest of the guys that did all of the testing. Maybe that's one to speak about in the future, or maybe you guys know in the comment section down below you can speak about it. But yeah, Red Bull, they were down the pecking order in terms of times, but I think, let's be perfectly honest, I mean, they were behind Toro Rosso, and I think if that happened in real life, Toro Rosso would be ordered to get out of the way, whatever. So I think we'll see Red Bull come into Australia probably a little bit behind the Ferrari and Mercedes guys, but I think there's much more potential with this Honda power unit over a season. I don't think we're going to see Ferrari and Mercedes make so much drastic gain over a season, but I think we might see Honda make a drastic gain over the season. I think possibly all Red Bull fans and Toro Rosso fans like myself, maybe Red Bull and Toro Rosso will have a power unit by the end of the season which is maybe equal to the front two. We will see. We will see. I'm not going to jump to any conclusions just yet, but got my fingers crossed because come on, Danny Cuvier. So overall, as we've said, pretty impressive from a couple of teams to get so many laps in, but slightly negative for Racing Point and Williams. Obviously, most importantly, Williams, after having a really tough last couple of years to be bottom of the timesheets, doing the least laps as well. They were 6/10 of a second behind anyone, and that was Racing Point, who I think were somewhat sandbagging because they were 3/10 of a second behind Alfa Romeo. And Racing Point were over a second slower, or sorry, just under a second slower than Renault, and I think Racing Point and Renault won't be too far apart by the time we get to Australia, at least not nearly a second. So I think that's going to be really interesting. I think Racing Point were somewhat sandbagging, but I think Williams, unfortunately for them, I don't think they were sandbagging. I think they literally are just in a big mess right now, and I'm really worried for them, because of course, as a British Formula 1 fan, you don't want to see someone like Williams struggling, because they've got so much success. I mean, they've got more constructors titles in Formula 1 than McLaren. I mean, I know McLaren aren't going through the greatest patch in their history right now, but still, McLaren you'd probably think as the more successful team manufacturer, but in fact they're not. Williams are, and they're really struggling over this past year. So Williams being at the bottom, the least laps, that is very worrying. If we look at the power units, another interesting stat to look at, who had the most laps for a power unit. Of course, this is slightly biased because some teams have more power units sort of being run than others. Of course, Ferrari having 3 teams, Mercedes having 3 teams, Renault only having 2, and likewise with Honda. That's why there's a bit of a disparity in the lap times. But nonetheless, Mercedes and Ferrari both doing over 2,000 laps. Mercedes doing 2,382, Ferrari doing 2,790, so quite a substantial amount more. But in terms of lap times, we've said already, 3 thousandths between them. Renault did 1,834 laps, Honda did 1,768. So, you know, it kind of balances itself out. I mean, I think Ferrari undoubtedly had the most laps if you average it out, but I think Renault and Honda aren't that far behind because, of course, as we've said already, they both have 1 less car on the grid, or 2 less cars on the grid technically, but in pre-season testing it's only 1. So you know what I mean. I don't think it works out that bad. I think Honda and Renault both seem pretty reliable. We don't know whether they're being absolutely, ragged to the limit throughout pre-season testing, but it doesn't look like they're drastically unreliable like we would have seen if they were breaking down every 5 minutes. We would know that by now. Of course, there have been technical gremlins for the majority of the cars on the grid, but at the end of the day, I think that's what pre-season testing is for. We want to find out those issues now, and then by the time we get to Australia, we want to see all of the engines reliable. I mean, obviously not everyone wants to see every engine reliable, because some people would rather see the Mercedes and the Ferrari, for example, fail, and maybe we'd have a funny Honda win at some point. That would be quite interesting and kind of smashing the teeth for McLaren, but I'll get to that when it comes. I think it might actually happen this year, which would be kind of funny. But I've drawn up my list of what I think the top 10 is right now. It's slightly different to what I expected at the start of the season. You'd have seen various pre-season testing videos that I've done, or pre-season predictions videos. My ideas maybe have slightly changed because of pre-season testing, but nothing drastic, because I've got to be real. I know that pre-season testing doesn't mean a huge amount in terms of lap times, but I think some things have slightly swung my opinion on a certain number of areas. So I think at the front we're going to put, like always, Ferrari and Mercedes. I didn't really ever expect them not to be the front 2 teams on the grid, but I still think they are going to be. I think they're going to be the 2 going for the championship this year. I do think Red Bull will be strong, especially towards the end of the season. I can't see them, this is like famous last words, I can't see them going to Australia and winning, but I'm sure that's going to be clipped up when they inevitably win the Australian Grand Prix now. But I see Ferrari and Mercedes being the front 2 teams, with Red Bull in a bit of a sort of league of their own in terms of third place. I can see them being third place sort of all by themselves, really, going through the first part of this season. So I see Ferrari, Mercedes, the top 2, pretty much equal. I don't know what order to put them in, just those 2 in one order. Red Bull in third. Renault, I'm going to say, I'm going to put them as my 4th best team. However, this is where the changes are changing. Good sentence. I honestly think Toro Rosso have impressed somewhat in pre-season testing, not just in the amount of laps they've been doing, but also in terms of their times. Okay, I know they are going to be behind Red Bull inevitably at the end of testing, but I'm interested to see that they're doing better than I thought. Let's just say that. I thought Toro Rosso were going to be one of the back-end teams, and now I think they could actually be genuinely in the midfield. So I've put them into the midfield, whereas before I had them, I think, towards the back with Williams and McLaren, who I still think are going to be there. It'll be interesting to see if that happens. But I put Toro Rosso into the midfield, so I think Toro Rosso will be battling with the likes of Racing Point, Haas and Alfa Romeo. I think McLaren might also come into that mix as well. I think we're going to have a really strong midfield, and I think that's really good to see. I still think Williams are going to be out the back by themselves, which is really sad for both Kubica and Russell, who are both coming to the season. Important for both of them for different reasons, really. Of course, Kubica coming back for this return, and Russell, after winning Formula 2, well, let's be honest, he wants to come in and do a good job in F1, and he's probably not going to have the car underneath him, unfortunately. But I think, as I've been saying, I think top 4, in my mind at least, are somewhat decided. I think that Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull and Renault will be the top 4 in some order. Then, apart from that, I think that Toro Rosso, Racing Point, Haas, Alfa Romeo, McLaren, in some order, will be the next few teams. And I think Williams, unfortunately, will be the team out the back of the grid by themselves. But nonetheless, I think it's going to be a really, really close midfield scrap this season. I'm really, really excited to see what happens between them. If you think Renault in the midfield, let me know in the comment section down below, but I'd actually really like to see your opinions on this one. Out of all of those teams I listed in the midfield, Toro Rosso, Racing Point, Haas, Alfa Romeo and McLaren, who do you think is going to come out on top? Who do you think is going to be the 5th best team in Formula 1? Or 4th best, if you include Renault in that category? Let me know in the comment section down below. That's going to be an interesting one. I really want to hear your opinions on that. Overall, I am just worried for Williams. That's my biggest thing out of pre-season testing. They look slow. They've had a lot less testing than the majority of the rest of the teams, and they've got 2 guys that are into their team who are extremely talented, but they haven't got too much F1 experience in the last 10 years. So that's going to be kind of worrying for them. I mean, I know Kubica has had a lot of F1 experience, but that was like 9 or 10 years ago. And George Russell has had recent Formula 1 experience, but maybe like Albon, Norris, and maybe you could even throw Giovinazzi in there as well. They haven't really had race experience in Formula 1, and that is kind of different. And I'm really interested to see what happens with Williams. I'm worried for them, I'm not going to lie. Yes, they've got a nice big amount of money coming in this year by the look of all the sponsors on their car, but at the same time I'm very worried for them in terms of their car performance, because it's not looking too promising. But overall, I think that it's a really, really interesting pre-season testing. Unlike some of the previous years where we had cars sort of going off left, right and centre, and lots of issues with car engine and reliability and just car reliability in general, this year it's been a little bit more, I don't know, a bit more calm in a way, because a lot more of the teams have been just getting a solid amount of laps in. I mean, it's interesting, Mercedes were the only team to break over the 1,000 laps for a singular team. They did nearly 1,200 laps, whereas Ferrari only did 997 laps, just short of the 1,000. Then the majority of teams did between 850 and 960, so quite a big midfield in terms of numbers, in terms of laps done per team. But I think that, you know, generally the majority of the teams, except from Williams, I think more disappointing was that Force India, even though they'd done a couple more days than Williams, had only done 60 more laps, which, I don't know, maybe it's worth noting that. Maybe we should see, come to Australia, maybe Racing Point could be in a few issues. I don't know, I'm just interested. I don't know why they did so little laps for the amount of time they had out on track. Williams, understandable, because they just had missed, 3 or so days. But Racing Point, like 200 laps behind the next worst car, Red Bull, on 833. I don't know what's going on there. They've got a reliable engine, we think, in the terms of the Mercedes power unit. I don't know. Very interesting. Maybe you guys can let me know on some issue here that Racing Point had that I wasn't really aware of, or I'm just being oblivious to. I'm not too sure. Nonetheless, that's pretty much it for this video. I appreciate your thoughts on this one as well. All that will be in the comment section down below, so get your comments going and I will be responding to as many as possible. And yeah, thank you for watching, guys. Appreciate the support on the videos as always. Thank you to all the new subscribers as well recently. I'm really enjoying putting out content, and even though it's busy with, you know, university work and making these videos as well and all the other stuff, I really am enjoying it, and I feel like I'm putting out better content. There's still definitely ways I can improve it, and I'm always open for that, and I've seen your suggestions and I think I'm going in the right direction, but you know, I'm always trying to evolve, so always appreciate your comments and concerns. Thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully enjoyed it. I'll see you guys around soon. It's been Alex Goodbye.